My name's Aaron Day. I'm the chairman of the Republican Liberty Caucus of New Hampshire. It's my pleasure today to introduce James O'Keefe, who is here from New Jersey. He was supposed to be here yesterday at 11, had a 22-hour travel experience, and I think that, well, I don't know how many people know that this was even rescheduled for this time, but we'll make a note that a 9:45 a.m. presentation after a Sex, Lies, and Anarchy party maybe not a good idea in the future. So in any event, I'm sure all of you are probably familiar with James, so I won't spend too much time on this. He's from New Jersey, studied philosophy at Rutgers, but is known for his journalism skills. While at Rutgers, he received a $500 Balance in the Media grant from the Leadership Institute, which he used to expose political correctness. And he and several other students met with the Rutgers dining staff and demanded the removal of Lucky Charms based on the fact that the leprechaun mascot represents an offensive stereotype to Irish Americans. And so it was taken off for a while. They did put it back, but he's worked on some less ambitious projects since then. He's now the founder and president of Project Veritas. As we all know, you might not know him. He's not wearing his normal pimp gear right now, but was responsible for exposing Acorn for the fraud that organization is. He has spent some time here in New Hampshire uncovering voter fraud and had some interesting taped interactions with our Attorney General at the time, Richard Head.
Yeah,
Richard Head.
Deputy Attorney General.
So, yes. And is now working on some fascinating things with respect to a subject near and dear to my heart, which is Obamacare fraud. So with that said, I'll turn it over to James O'Keefe.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to stand here part of the time because I'm going to be controlling the computer, but I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do, and I think the subject of the talk is how to infiltrate the mainstream media, how to get covered by the media. The number one issue facing whether it's activists or citizens who want to get their voice out, is how do we get fairly covered by the mainstream media? How do we get our issues into the public domain? Well, today I'm going to spend some time talking to you about how I've done that. I'm going to take you on a little journey through some of our successes and some of the media reactions, and I think you'll be pretty entertained. The name of the organization is Project Veritas. As you can see, I call myself a community organizer. Some people always say, well, why would you call yourself a community organizer? Because I organize citizens to reclaim the power that is theirs from the powers working against them, like the media and the government. So that's why I call myself a community organizer. We are a nonprofit foundation which trains people how to become undercover guerrilla journalists. And there are very few people doing this because it requires a lot of nerve, and you oftentimes make enemies with powerful people. So I'm going to show you a couple scenes of what I've done and sort of walk you through an analysis of what we've done and how we've done it.
Just keep it to yourself. Just keep it to yourself. Oh, yeah.
So here's something we did over the summer, just by way of introduction. We walked up to these government-subsidized phones, some of them call them Obama phones, and we said we wanted to sell these phones, which are supposed to be used for lifeline purposes, if you need to get a job or you need to make a phone call to the hospital, and we said we wanted to sell the phones in exchange for heroin. Yes.
It's against the law.
If you're interested in learning how the phones work, I recommend you go to any pawn shop. I can get the phone and then sell it. Yeah, I don't care.
It's up to you. No, just keep it to yourself. Just keep it to yourself.
Now, this worker was actually fired. This is one you're seeing right here. And there are 4 other workers who were also fired. These are federal contractors, federal government contractors. And most of the work we do actually does get people fired. And when that happens, the media is forced to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. The last thing they want to talk about is fraud in a federal government program. But we force them to talk about it. And of course, we produce these sort of vignettes, these entertaining sort of mashup music-style compilation videos on YouTube to accompany the footage. So here we have the bag being sold for drugs and other things. We're on a yacht overlooking the Manhattan skyline. We're trying to make the video as viral as possible. Some people say this is unnecessary. I like doing it because it's entertaining. But in all seriousness, it does cause a major media reaction. We get covered, I'm sure you're all familiar with these outlets. It gets covered by organizations like Drudge. This one made the UK Daily Mail. It was one of the highest trafficked stories on that website. It had something like 16,000 shares of the article. Millions and millions of people saw this article. The video went very viral.
Back to follow-up segment tonight, ripping off the American taxpayer. As you may know, the nation now owes close to $17 trillion of disaster. Recently, a whistleblower group called Project Veritas, Truth in Latin, launched an undercover investigation.
Every time we do an investigation, it forces a response. It forces people to resign.
Yeah, the Philadelphia company fired all the guys and said, yeah, it's okay to sell the phone for heroin.
So they fire the workers, but then what happens next? Well, then there's usually a government reaction, which is the most important thing. In this case, Federal Communications Commission warned the companies not to skip income eligibility checks. And this is what I think the most important part of this process is getting a reaction from the people in power and getting results. And that's what we do. Oftentimes they talk about us, talk about the organization that did the investigative reporting. Sometimes I don't even need to go undercover. This is one of my favorite videos. You all know who Mike Wallace is, 60 Minutes. Diane Sawyer, who's won Investigative Reporters and Editors Awards for doing what I do. My people will never, ever win any such award. But there's a long tradition of ambushing people with microphones, walking into offices. In this case, I confronted the guy. This is U.S. Attorney Jim Letton out of New Orleans. I was prosecuted in New Orleans for being inside a federal building with a camera, which is not a crime. But they tried to manufacture a crime I did not do. They tried to say that I was there to tamper with the telephones in the government building or something. So I went to this guy's office at Tulane and asked him, sir, why did you do this? Why did you leak? Why did somebody leak my emails to the press? What do you have to say for yourself? And watch his reaction.
You little cowardly spud, all of you, you're hobbits. You are less than I can ever tell you. You are scum. Do you understand? I didn't prosecute your case, asshole.
New York Times best-selling book. New York Times best-selling book. It talks all about it.
I recused here. I recused from your case. Listen to me. You're violating federal law. You spend your life as a snail. You do weird little political things. You're a horse's ass.
So, as you can see, I don't understand the Hobbit put down. But oftentimes these people are so drunk with power, they've never been asked a difficult question in their entire lives. So I just walk up to them like, sir, why did you destroy federal evidence? Oh, you're a hobbit, you're a snail, you're a punk, you're a criminal. And people at Tulane, alumni at Tulane actually were posting, they're not going to send their kids to Tulane. This guy's a dean at Tulane Law School. And those cops that were standing behind him were just doing his bidding. Now, he threw a book at me, and I'm not going to get all upset about it, but that's a crime. You can't throw things at people. That would be an assault. I never assaulted anybody. I never even committed a crime in this original scenario. But every time we do something like this and we talk about infiltrating the mainstream media, we get the media to report about it.
A powerful exchange on Tulane's campus is all caught on camera. Former U.S. Attorney Jim Letton was confronted at the university by an activist. He regrets losing his temper while addressing the impropriety of O'Keefe's conduct.
What impropriety? I walked up to him on the street with a microphone and asked him a question, impropriety. But nevertheless, he apologized and we got a conversation going. A conversation nobody wanted to have about the Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney knowing, blogging about anonymous emails that they leaked from our account.
James O'Keefe, description, a good analogy would be to compare him to the special forces of the conservative movement infiltrating enemy lines and becoming amongst them and getting them on videotape being who they are. Therefore, no explanation is required.
So listen to what Rush said there. Being who they are, no explanation is required. That's the most important thing. A lot of people advocate, they comment, they interpret, they respond. What we do is we expose things for what they are, and political and legislative consequences follow that, which is very unique. And I think that reality is oftentimes your best advocate. We also use satire and ridicule. We use political jujitsu. Let me give you an example of that. In New York, where I'm from, New Jersey, I'm from New Jersey, but our office is in New York, they banned, or they didn't ban, there was this whole Sandy massacre, and in the months following that, they printed the names of the gun owners. How many people remember this? They printed the people who own guns. So someone kind of, James, you got to do something about this. They're printing the names of law-abiding gun owners. So I thought, okay. And the people who are doing this are for what they call gun-free zones, right? Or gun-free zones. So I decided to make them live up to their own book of rules. I decided to launch a campaign to post bulletins on the lawns of the anti-gun people that announced their homes to be proudly gun-free zones. After all, if you're for a gun-free zone, wouldn't you want to broadcast to the world that your home is free of guns? What, you don't like children? You want to promote violence? Of course you want to promote the fact that your house is a gun-free zone. And wouldn't any anti-gun person be willing to advertise that? Well, the results are pretty fascinating.
Back in the segment tonight, did you see that? A group called Project Veritas, Project Truth, roams around the country confronting people they feel are not serving the public interest. Recently, they went after some anti-gun zealots, asking them if they would put a sign on their property that says, gun-free home. Join us.
Tell everyone your house is completely unprotected.
Tell them this is a gun-free zone.
Put a sign in your lawn that says, no guns here. We're not afraid.
We're defenseless. We are not afraid. Join us.
Join us.
Join us. Because there's strength in numbers.
I'm sorry, are you the same one that's on TV? What are the chances we could get something like on this door? I noticed it's all like a glass door in the front, something that just says, you know.
This is Toure from MSNBC. This is his house in Brooklyn, New York. And listen to his reaction to my request.
This building probably gun-free or something like that.
I agree with you, and I am on your side on this, but I'm just wondering if that's not an invitation to somebody with a gun.
Yeah, well, the only problem is we can't put it up. My wife works for the newspaper. Can you leave a sign with you? Yeah, put it up when the time is right. Yeah.
If they're like not allowed that time, or if you talk that, is this not in the
I don't know about anybody else.
So when we did this, what happened? There was a reaction, of course. But then, remarkably, the newspaper that did this removed the database of gun permit holders because we went to the homes of the journalists who printed them. So, you know, Saul Alinsky talks about, you're all familiar with Saul Alinsky, personalizing the target. Well, that's what we did. Not only did we personalize it, we went to the homes of journalists who don't serve the public interest. And there was a reaction, the biggest reaction possible. They removed the database. And that's the most important thing, is getting some type of reaction. Not only that, but they fired the editor of the Westchester, New York newspaper who did this. So oftentimes people do get fired. I don't have the power to fire them. I don't lobby. Let me move on to another issue, voter fraud. Again, personalizing the subject. In this case, we went to the poll location for Attorney General Eric Holder. And there's this whole discussion about whether voter ID is racist. and warranted. So we went to Eric Holder's poll location, and we said that we wanted to vote, and we mentioned his name. We said, do you have Eric Holder on your voter list here? And the poll official actually offered us a ballot in the name of Eric Holder, because he assumed that my videographer was Eric Holder. And watch what happens here.
I actually forgot my ID.
You don't need it, sir.
I left it in the car.
As long as you're here, you're on our list, and that's who you say you are. Okay.
I would feel more comfortable if I just had my IDs all right. If I go get it. I'll be back faster than you can say furious.
As you can see, this does not look like Eric Holder.
An X would suffice. But you won't be able to compare it to my normal signature.
We don't compare anyway. This was devastating.
Makes mincemeat of these people's argument. And the fact that it was Holder is just delectable.
And then there was the reaction from the Washington, D.C. government.
And an official in Holder's Justice Department told 9 News Now it is no coincidence that these so-called examples of rampant voter fraud consistently turn out to be manufactured ones.
But
it hardly inspires the public confidence that a white 20-something can obtain the ballot of the first black attorney general. And there's a little video here to illustrate that point.
I wanted to also ask you about your reaction when you saw the video of the young man who claimed your ballot here some months ago.
You know, I mean, it's an attempt to show something, I suppose, but I think what I drew from that video was that that guy was very careful not to say he was Eric Holder, not to actually get a ballot. He didn't do the kinds of things that would have subjected him to criminal prosecution.
And I'm not worried about that.
It's interesting that the most powerful legal official in the country just cleared me of breaking the law because the governor of New Hampshire tried to accused me of breaking the law for doing the same thing I just did in this video. But I think the point of this is to get reactions from Obama and Holder. It's very significant. And I think that's what journalism ought to be. Journalism is not supposed to be you going to a press conference and asking questions and record. Journalism is supposed to be getting the most powerful people to respond to the issues that you raise. And that's what we have done. And the solution to, I think, our country's problems is to do more of this, is to scale this, is to do it in every state, is to do it with every single Attorney General, Secretary of State, and Governor. And to get congressional hearings like this, where they're held accountable, for their lies, that's the type of thing that we need to be doing.
Picture ID.
These are necessarily bad. These are necessarily bad.
So, how effective are these exposés? Well, the nation, which is no friend of freedom, was upset that these states were changing their voter laws to require voter ID because of these videos. It said James O'Keefe scams voter ID into existence. I don't have that power. I don't know how to lobby state legislators. Some people here do that. I don't do that. I don't even, frankly, even talk to people in Congress. I very rarely make public appearances in state Senate sessions. They're saying that I have the power to change the law. I don't have that power. Reality did that, right? The YouTube videos got citizens outraged, and they in turn put pressure on their elected representatives. That's the democratic process. That's democracy in action, to borrow their phrase. But they're saying, I changed the law. I don't have the power to change laws. But I do have the power to expose fraud, waste, lies, and cheats. Some people in the states the New York Times was, the last thing the New York Times wants to do is talk about this stuff. But they were forced to talk about it because of an investigation by the District of Columbia into the fact that the Attorney General's ballot was offered to me. And I do not look like a 63-year-old...
undercover at UNC.
I do not look like a 63-year-old African-American Attorney General. In this case, we also went to universities. A lot of people say, James, you need to expose the universities, you need to expose the professors. So we did. We went to UNC, Chapel Hill, and proposed a voter fraud scenario.
Secretly taping at least 2 UNC officials while O'Keefe's operative discusses a voter fraud scheme. This university staffer laughs, at one point seeming to even encourage the plan.
Where can I get active and get somebody out of the General Assembly?
In a statement to Eyewitness News, UNC Chancellor Holden Thorpe writes, while the scenarios described in the video were false, some of our administrators responded inappropriately, and we are taking disciplinary action against those who used poor judgment in their approach to these student imposters.
Imagine if you did this at 100 universities. Said, oh, it's just one professor, one director, one... What if you did it at 100 places? What if 100 professors got fired next week? Do you think that would make a difference? So, but it's funny because I always have to sell what I do because it's so unusual, but imagine if you would a scenario like that. And again, I don't have the power to fire these people, nor do I even like to see them fired. But if the university is sufficiently outraged to fire, that's how you know they're really bad. We've done this in Obama re-election offices. This is Organizing for America at Houston, Texas.
Date stamp on the video says October 1st at the Democratic Party's Organizing for America Houston office. The undercover investigator wearing a hidden camera tells a worker identified as Regional Field Director Stephanie Caballero that she's registered to vote in Texas but could also vote absentee in Florida. She wants the paperwork to get it done.
If I have an opportunity to make my voice heard, I'm going to make my vote twice. I'm going to make it heard twice. So. Okay.
Caballero does encourage the woman to vote in Florida, where the swing state ballot may prove more valuable to the Obama campaign, and admits voting multiple times is not her expertise. But she does nothing to stand in the woman's way.
Oh my God, this is so funny. Cool, man.
A trip to the Organizing for America office in Alameda found the doors locked tight. But late this afternoon, the left-leaning website Talking Points memo quoted a DNC spokeswoman as saying Stephanie Caballero has been fired.
Alert right now in Virginia, Congressman Jim Moran.
So they fired the director of this office and they shut the entire Obama headquarters down because of our video. What if we did 100 of those videos? What if they shut down 100 headquarters? Okay? So this is one small step, right, in the journey of 1,000 miles. But journalism tends to work when it's actually tried. I want to show you one of these segments. We talk about infiltrating the mainstream media. This is in Virginia. This is Congressman Jim Moran out of Arlington, Virginia. His son was caught on tape by our cameras. And I want to walk you through the media coverage, talk about how you can leverage the local media to make an impact. This is Jim Moran.
Son, Patrick, has resigned from his father's campaign after he was caught on camera talking to someone about how to commit voter fraud.
A conservative group, Project Veritas.
Undercover video from the group Project Veritas.
The covert video was captured by the conservative group Project Veritas.
A conservative group called Project Veritas.
An organization called Project Veritas.
Congresswoman, it was released by something called Project Veritas, which is a conservative group that's headed by James O'Keefe.
On the video, a man is pitching a voter fraud plan to Patrick Moran, who was field director for his father's re-election. The plan calls for casting ballots in the names of 100 voters who are registered but won't be voting. Now, initially, Moran seems reluctant, but eventually he starts giving suggestions about how the man can put that plan into action. Moran's campaign office released a statement calling the incident an error in judgment.
Even if all he was doing was humoring what he thought was an overzealous supporter, you don't do it that way.
And within hours, Patrick Moran resigned. The resignation comes just one day after Congressman Jim Moran called on the Department of Justice to investigate voter fraud.
Just think about that for a second. The congressman had to fire his son the day before he asked Congress to investigate voter fraud. And he fired his son for voter fraud. It's like Shakespearean. It's certainly Alinsky. And the people in the libertarian movement don't really do this type of stuff. For whatever reason, they don't really go on offense like their enemies do. The people on the right are even worse. And they don't really get offensive. They are on defense. They are huddled together, protecting themselves from the enemy. You have to go out. You have to put yourself out there. You have to go on offense. You have to do adversarial journalism like this. And that's how you're going to win.
Hey, so what do you think of that videotape?
I mean, it's just indefensible.
Indefensible. I mean, this is winning. This is putting them on defense. And I'll tell you what else. She's going to go on to say it's an isolated incident. It's just one person. Again, what if you had 12 of them? What if you had 12 congressional aides?
he was right to resign?
That senior member and progressive stalwart James P. Moran has announced he will step down at the end of this year.
Mark and Maria, regardless of what people think of the tactics here, this is certainly an eye-opening investigation. It was conducted by conservative and controversial activist James O'Keefe and his group, Project Veritas. You may remember O'Keefe. He's the guy who made headlines dressing up as a pimp to expose problems at Acorn. On primary day, his people took undercover cameras and the names of the dead to polling places in New Hampshire.
Democratic ballot.
State law says you don't need an ID to vote in New Hampshire. And this video appears to show you may not need a pulse either. The self-described watchdog group, Project Veritas, claims it gave the names of dead people at more than a dozen polling places.
Here we are. George F. at St. James Place. Okay. And you're a registered Democrat. Okay, so here's the Democratic ballot. And the pens are in the booth.
According to Project Veritas, they received ballots every time except one, when a poll worker actually knew the dead person. James O'Keefe says this shows just how easy it is for someone in New Hampshire to commit voter fraud.
In New Hampshire, I feel like this is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the voting system. At the very least, they should remove all of the deceased people from the voter registration logs.
Oh, I left my ID in the car.
You don't get it.
I don't need ID.
Look for your guy. This is New Hampshire. You might need it.
O'Keefe says his so-called citizen journalists did not commit any crimes because none of them ever actually voted. The New Hampshire State Attorney General is now investigating the integrity of the voting process and the tactics O'Keefe and Project Veritas used. Okay, so New Hampshire House Speaker William O'Brien calls the video stunning. He says it shows a, quote, absurd level of ease of voting in New Hampshire, and he's going to try again to get a law passed that requires photo ID. We also talked to Nashua City Clerk Paul Bergeron tonight. He says this is nothing more than a stunt. He says O'Keefe and his group committed identity theft, and he wants them prosecuted.
I think it is outrageous that we have these out-of-staters coming into New Hampshire, coming into our polling places and misrepresenting themselves to the election officials. And I hope that they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
So this is a common retort that I should be going to jail, because this is the last refuge of rhetoric. There's nothing for them to say, so put him in jail. Kill him. Stop him. This is the way fascists think. There's nothing for them to say, there's no logic, so they just jail him. And particularly when you have governors doing it, it's even better. So this guy looks sort of like a Soviet, what's the name of the guy? Not Lenin. Is it Lenin? He looks like, Paul Bergeron, the Nashua guy, looks like Lenin.
If, in fact, this man O'Keefe collected more than a dozen ballots in doing this film, he actually increased fraud in the state by 1,200% to try to prove there was a problem that didn't exist.
Yeah, you don't prove that there's been voter fraud by committing it yourself. He's establishing an activity that creates a voter fraud situation, and it's his own activity that should be looked at and prosecuted.
But, you know, that didn't matter because you still get the results. There was a Senate. The Senate was talking about this after the video, and some things are moving. So, but look at the media and how they manufacture these controversies and try to accuse you of breaking the law when you didn't. It's certainly something you have to deal with as a journalist, is dealing with a lot of the attacks from the people who hate you. And I do believe that it's one of the reasons why people don't do what I do, because they're afraid. But in fact, the city government started doing this thing shortly after I did in New York City. They did secret shoppers. They showed that dead people can vote in New York City. There was a big Inspector General report over it. Same thing we did. The media was not outraged by that. They were okay with that.
Obamacare navigators that received millions of dollars.
So we went in after the Obamacare navigators. We walked in there. How many people saw this video expose? Yeah, a few of them. This video has like 1 million views on YouTube.
Yeah, but don't tell me. Always the loud man. Okay.
Obamacare navigators counseling applicants how to defraud the federal government.
making money on a cash basis.
Okay.
Don't get yourself in trouble by declaring it now.
Exactly.
Yeah, it didn't happen. The difference with that other just act as if that did not
happen. Okay.
never report.
Okay.
Days after President Obama thanked navigators in Dallas for signing people up on the new government-run healthcare exchange.
If people can't get through the website, people can apply in person if they've got committed folks who are out there helping people to sign up.
Okay. Project Veritas heads to Texas to...
Now, think about this video for a second. I'm showing the government telling me how to defraud the IRS. That's the reason why it's effective. I'm not complaining about the IRS. I'm actually showing them defrauding the IRS. So there's no defense. They can't possibly defend that. It'd be one thing if I was showing someone how to, if I was showing the opposite. But these workers were all fired. And then I know that the response, well, they're just low-level people, incompetent. They can't say that because these officers were getting $1 million each from the federal government. They were allocated that much money in the Obamacare funding for the navigators. Those individuals you just saw, combined, revenue $300,000 in federal money to fund them signing people up for Obamacare. So they can say they're low level all they want, but when it comes to millions of dollars of your taxpayer money, that presents a problem for them. And when you add up the amount of money that we're spending on this, they can't fire all these workers. At some point, they're going to have to reform the actual problem.
Expose Obamacare navigator fraud.
So what happened after these videos? There was an intense media reaction.
Enter Project Veritas. It sent an undercover person to the National Urban League offices in Dallas.
Sessions brought the hearing to Richardson after a group named Project Veritas
Caught a lot of navigators on tape.
Navigators have been caught.
All right, what are they doing here? Lying, cheating, and stealing.
Texas Senator John Cornyn wants to shut down the whole Navigator program.
Enroll America?
A group that is dedicated to helping people sign up for Obamacare.
Cut ties with an employee after he was caught on camera.
Conspiring to release the private data of you, the American people. This undercover video.
This is just one more data point in the Republican obsession with sabotaging Obamacare.
I almost at this point feel sorry for Jay Carney. He has to go out there every day and deny facts.
Meet Lawrence Jones, the man who entered 2 Urban League offices testing employees on the Affordable Care Act. Lawrence, tell me about how you became the undercover uninsured.
Well, I decided to set with Project Veritas, which is with James O'Keefe.
So we had about $1.7 million in media coverage across the country. So in other words, if you're a political action committee, you wanted to create advertisements against Obamacare, you'd have to spend $2 million just to get the advertising revenue that we got on a YouTube video. $2 million. And by the way, if you bought advertising, it'd go in like the in between the news. It wouldn't go into the news. It would go into the advertising designated programming. We got local media. There were 75 local affiliates, TV, across the country, not just in Texas, to talk about this issue, thus affecting other states. So that's how you infiltrate the mainstream media. And by the way, my enemies, the one thing they hate more than anything in the world is when I get covered by the mainstream media. They hate that because it shows that we're making an impact and we're stealing their real estate away from them. They do not like that. The national media, the Washington Post of the world, the New York Times of the world, the CBS, NBC, for the most part, they won't talk about me. They don't want to do it. But if you get the local media to talk about you on an aggregate, it is the cumulative effect of the national media. And you'll find the local media is a little more fair. I don't know specifically about WMUR, but they did cover that voter fraud expose. And they did a pretty fair job of it because they don't have the same type of national pressure against them as the local media did.
This is just one more data point in the Republican obsession with sabotaging Obamacare.
That was directed at me. That was directed at our videos. And I could show you many more instances of reactions from that level in the government. Obama commented on our Acorn videos. He said the actions of the employees were inappropriate. We had a whole bunch of resignations. And then most recently, this is an interesting thing that happened, because my office is in New York, or Westchester, New York, actually. I don't know what I'm doing in New York. I live in New Jersey, and I drive across the Tappan Zee Bridge into Westchester.
I live in Westchester.
I'm a Mamaroneck.
I live in White Plains.
Oh, there you go. The brazen fox, right? So we actually got a subpoena from Governor Cuomo. Here we go. This happened about a month ago.
New York State Conservative James O'Keefe's Project Veritas, which has repeatedly embarrassed Democrats with hidden videos, has been subpoenaed by the State Department of Labor for a comprehensive audit. That and the indictment of D'Souza occur after New York Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo suggested in an interview.
And if they are the extreme conservatives, they have no place in the state of New York. They have no place in the state of New York.
So Cuomo just said that, quote, extreme conservatives, I don't even label myself as a conservative, but extreme conservatives have no place in the state of New York, which is a pretty outrageous thing to say. And then a couple days later, I get a subpoena from one of his people asking for every financial transaction my organization has done over the last 3 years. Now, I have been audited. I was put on federal probation for 3 years, so every single dollar I spent was accounted by the government anyway. So I am the most transparent human being ever. So I'm not afraid of being audited by the state of New York. But nevertheless, he sent me this letter, subpoena, come to this court thing. Most people, when they get something like this, what do? What would you do? You'd get scared. You'd hire lawyers. You'd probably huddle in your basement amongst your libertarian friends. Guess what I did? I published the letter. I issued a press release. I got it on Drudge. I went on Fox. I went on Lou Dobbs.
Back to our top story, our first guest tonight accusing New York Governor Andrew Cuomo's administration of targeting his group with document requests and a subpoena trying to intimidate him. Specifically, why do you think that you're being targeted by the New York State government?
Well, Cuomo had said in the recent days that conservatives should not be welcome in New York, they should leave.
Right.
And we are a group of citizen journalists. Project Veritas is a movement of citizen journalists. We have a small nonprofit with under $1 million budget. And we got a subpoena in the last week or so asking for all financial records going back 3 years, all documents related to every single financial transaction that has happened. So it seems suspicious to me, with all the fraud, the waste, the abuse, the pensions funds in New York State, that they would come after a group like mine. In our case, it's not just words. These are an actual subpoena. I have to show up in court next week.
So what happened next? Unbelievably, Cuomo dropped the subpoena. A lot of older people, because I'm in my 20s, say, James, you're naive, you think you can change the world, you think you can take on these powerful people, you're wrong. Well, I think I've demonstrated that I can take on powerful people by using mass political jujitsu, by making them live up to their own book of rules, if Cuomo says, you need to leave my state if you don't agree with me politically, and I demonstrate that he's actually doing that, it makes him look bad because I think he wants to run for president. So he doesn't want to be seen as a fascist, so he has to draw back his actions. And that's what we did. And I think the best thing to do is to go on offense. So in this case, they dropped the subpoena, or they dropped the court date. I have yet to receive a new court date. I'm welcome to, you're happy to go through my bank account. I've already established, I know that I'm a public figure and they're going to be monitoring my every move, so I'm not afraid of them looking at every single transaction, but I sure wish they held the government as accountable as they hold me. But yeah, they dropped the subpoena.
Even if the actions and the timing are coincidental, the effect is chilling. A post on the Project Veritas website says the harassment is never ending, and it's expensive to keep defending.
So, yeah, by talking about these issues, by bringing them to light, we were able to get those reactions. And just to give you an idea of the type of political results from our work in 2013, I want to show you the results. We got 4 navigators fired. We got 1 director of OFA resign, 1 congressional hearing, a federal investigation questioning Enroll America, that's Kathleen Sebelius' group, retraining for all Obamacare navigators, Obama phone employees fired, 1 federal communications warning on Obama phone carriers, a United States attorney corrupt connections exposed, and he resigned, And a newspaper in New York forced to take down the map of all the people who own guns in Westchester County, and they fired the editor-in-chief of that newspaper. That's 1 year. Less than $1 million. If you were to add up all the earned media from these stories, you'd get millions and millions of dollars. So, you know, people give their money to these political action committees, and I'm sure some of them do good work, but the return on investment for both time, talent, and treasure on a political action committee is just nowhere near the return on investment for time, talent, and treasure on doing the type of adversarial journalism that we do in the way that we do it. Let's see, what else do I got here? I think... And then we just recently released a video this year. I don't have it with me, but Wendy Davis, some people call her the abortion Barbie, running for governor against Greg Abbott. This is big in Texas. She was making fun of Abbott because he's in a wheelchair. The Attorney General of Texas is handicapped. And there were some comments there that we caught on tape. Again, we're talking about emotions and feelings, not about policy. Which they want to talk about emotions and feelings. That's what I expose. So that's Project Veritas, and I'll be happy to take any questions you might have. Yes. Oh, microphone. Sure.
Mine is more of a comment, actually. We're from Illinois, and if you were to decide to relocate to Chicago, you'd never have to leave.
Oh, because of the fraud there?
Because, yes, of everything. I mean, what, 2 of our last 3 governors are either in jail or just recently released.
Well, the interesting
you have
thing
your
about
choice
Illinois is that it's difficult for me to work in places like Illinois and California because they have a 2-party consent recording law, where I need the permission of the person I'm filming. I got in trouble in California. I got sued by Acorn for filming him. And I would argue these statutes are unconstitutional because I don't think government workers ever have an expectation of privacy when they're on the job. But I'm sure your Attorney General would try to indict me if I were to be filming your but
You're right about that. I was handcuffed for trying to videotape a police officer.
The police officers are the worst when it comes to the statutes. They will enforce those statutes, and I think it's a misdemeanor in Illinois to film. I would argue, again, a police officer has no expectation of privacy. When you're on a public street and you're filming him in the course of his duties, that's not a violation of the law. But a lot of these are cases of first impression, and I have been incarcerated. I know what it feels like to be falsely accused, and I don't want to go through it again. So I try to avoid areas of the law which are gray, but I would love to work in Illinois. Other questions?
Hello, thank you for coming. I'm a big fan of yours, and I'm enjoying having you here. I noticed that they frame you as a conservative, and you even said that you're not, or that's not what you're working for, to get labeled as such. So my question to you is, how are you going to maybe change this and maybe be framed as a progressive at times, or
right.
Attack the conservatives on the ground?
That's a good question. They have been able to brand me as something, and that's a product of me not spending my time marketing myself because I'm too busy doing what I do. There's a lot of people in D.C. that spend all of their time marketing themselves, and I just haven't done it. So the media will brand you, and that will be the label that you are given in perpetuity. Conservative activist. The irony is that they don't call George Stephanopoulos a liberal activist. They don't, which is what he is. In fact, he worked for Bill Clinton. I don't work for any politician. For whatever reason, journalism has become so politicized these days that if you investigate someone on one side, or let's say you go after Obama, you're automatically labeled a right-winger. And that's what people do. There's a dichotomy in the media, and they just put you in one of the 2 camps. And there's really not much that I can do to control that. The moment I go after, if I were to have taken down the National Rifle Association, like our videos took down Acorn, I would have won a Nobel Peace Prize. Not a Pulitzer, I would have won a Nobel Peace Prize for that. So there's certainly a double standard. Movies would have been made about my life. If I was doing this to, I don't know, Halliburton Oil Corporation, there would have already been a social network movie, Academy Award-winning movie made about it. I mean, this is unbelievably interesting material and fascinating stories. But they do label me a conservative because to investigate the government in this day and age, they will do that to you. I would argue that every journalist should be investigating government. That's the job of a journalist. But they don't see it that way. And I think what I have to do is go after targets who are more diverse targets, and then they'll start viewing me as a journalist. Because the number one thing they don't want to do is call me a journalist. Because if they do that, I'm afforded the rights, reputation, and respect that comes along with that title.
Thank you, James, for coming. Great to meet you, or see you. Bob Woodward, Carl Bernstein, they worked for the Washington Post. How would you evaluate the work they did with Watergate? And why isn't there, it's not like there isn't intellectual curiosity with the journalists going into a mainstream publication today like the Washington Post and the New York Times. Why do you think there is no curiosity, at least in terms of coming after the state?
Right, that's a good question. Why? The journalism schools are still stuck in this Woodward and Bernstein Nixon thing. All they can talk about is Woodward and Bernstein. There's plenty of material today to investigate. We don't need to keep talking about Richard Nixon. I think there's three factors. I think it's ambition, I think it's shared politics, and a pinch of fear. People think it's more political than it actually is. How many people have read the book This Town? This Town? You need to read this book. It's by a Washington, D.C. insider, and he documents the incestuous nature of the political, and I mean, the show House of Cards is closer to reality than most people think. They do sleep with their sources, and they are reliant upon their sources, and they get drunk with their sources, and they're the White House Correspondents' Dinner. They party together. I don't do any of that. So there's a sort of nexus, and there's a shared body politic in the media and government, and if you expose one of these people, you make yourselves enemies. They view you as an enemy of the state. And that's just the way it is. You have to be adversarial to those in power, and by doing that, you alienate yourself from those in power. I don't have sources on Capitol Hill because I burned them all. I exposed them. In my book, actually, there's a chapter about the Republican Oversight Committee. I went to them with the Acorn video. I said, hey, I'm Democracy in Action. Here's my material. And they threatened to have me arrested because they said, if you don't work with the Republican Party, we're going to arrest you because the system is broken. And I was like, I'm just Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I just want you to take my footage and do something with it. And they said, well, you must work with the Republican Party. I'm like, I'm not going to work with the Republican Party. I'm showing you the tapes, but I'm not going to be labeled as a Republican thing. So this is a problem. This is a problem in journalism. And my solution to the problem is, as the late journalist, what was his name? The guy who died in the fiery car crash, Michael Hastings said, he said, to be a journalist, you have to be in the wilderness. You have to be operating independently of any corporate thing. You have to be doing your own independent thing to really be able to speak truth to power these days. Because your hands will be tied by the Newsweeks of the world, by the Rolling Stones of the world. Diane.
James, can you tell us anything about your next project?
Sure. I mean, for the most part, I try not to get too detailed because I do have people out in the field. I don't want to jeopardize them, but this is a 2014 year with elections coming up, and there's states like Texas and Colorado and even New Hampshire where they have these battleground initiatives. So we're looking into the fraud in these electoral battleground states. We're also trying to do some investigations into more cultural issues like Hollywood and academia. Right now we're doing something on Hollywood. And I can't get into too much detail, but I think to make things more newsworthy, we try to go after topics and targets which are a little more culturally mainstream. Some of this stuff is in the weeds. But I'll be happy to tell you more privately. Who knows where this streaming video is going?
Everywhere, we hope.
Everywhere.
Once or twice you said this is one dean. Wouldn't it be great if there were 10 deans all
Right.
fired on the same day, or one professor,
Or
100
exposed,
professors? One thing that you've done a few times is sort of a 1-2 punch. Get a story out there, freeze the target so they're responding. Isolated incident, just one office,
Right.
and then you reveal 2 and 3 and 4. You've also sort of encouraged the audience, and I imagine encourage other audiences to get out there and do this. It seems that because of the power of the 1-2 punch of freezing them and then hitting them from another angle,
Right.
that implies that tactically coordination might be somewhat more effective than a bunch of lone wolves. Can you speak to your thoughts on the sort of combination of crowdsourcing versus the 1-2 punch?
So with the Acorn story, released the videos one at a time, and the media, Andrew Breitbart once said to me, James, the media is everything. He said, it's everything. It's not just one part of it. It's, you never get between a camera and a congressman. The media is everything because the media frames the debate. So you have to basically hack the media. And I don't mean that literally. Figuratively, you have to somehow play the mainstream media against itself. So the Acorn story, which everyone knows about, so I don't show it because everyone knows about that one, is the story with the pimp and the hooker, and it was like 8 videos released every day. The media had never seen anything like that before. That was the first time anyone had ever done that. So the first video, they said, they actually reported as fact that this was an isolated incident. And then the next day, the next video came out. So CNN actually got egg on their face. They were embarrassed. The New York Times had to issue a public apology for lying to their readership. Do you know how much they hate me? Like, to get the New York, the paper of record to apologize to New York City for lying to them? It was, again, it was political jujitsu. Now the problem is I can't do that again. I can't do that again. I'm running out of time, right? So I got one more question. I can't do that again. I can't use the same tactic or more than one. Now they know O'Keefe's got another one coming. So I have to use different tactics. I have to, I don't know what those tactics might be. So that worked very well that one time, and it always works well to at least a little bit at a time. One more question. Yes, sir.
We have, off the top of my head, I can think of 3 kind of variations on what you do here in New Hampshire with Ridley Report, governmentoversight.com, and CopBlock. Would you care to comment on the different angles that they cover that you know about?
Say the websites one more time.
There's Dave Ridley does Ridley Report, which is a YouTube news channel. Governmentoversight.com does more county meetings and town meetings and kind of filming those to keep an eye on the local government. And copblock.org it's a little bit more national.
What was the name of that last one?
Copblock.
Copblock.
Copblock.org.
So, I've seen the government oversight. Is it Ed? Yeah. He and I ambushed or interviewed your attorney general named Richard Head.
Deputy.
A deputy attorney general? Richard Head. I can't make this stuff up. So we talked to Richard, not Dick, and Ed is, his job is just surveillance. That's one of the things he does very well, and that's one of the things I do. Sometimes we do surveillance. One of those websites probably does policy interpretation or application. As an example, I go into these meetings and I have no idea what I'm going to find. Now, how did you know that they were going to do that? I don't know they're going to do that. All I know is if I go in there and film everything, I'm going to find something. I'm going to find something. And if we were to record everything our government was doing and mine through that footage and find those little nuggets and release those, things would be great. So I think this notion of monitoring, filming every meeting, looking at the footage, following up on it, that's what we need to do. And that's why these local websites like Granite Grok and these oversight websites are so important.
I know you're out of time. Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
If you could encourage this audience to do one thing, what would that be? And would that be every time there's new video from you and people like you to go out and share it and encourage their friends to share it and create an avalanche of awareness?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm also going to, I have a flight in an hour and a half, but I'm going to be out there for half an hour. You can come up to me and talk to me more personally. I have books, and I have also Project Veritas sheets where they can get involved and become videographers if you're so willing. But the issue that I have more generally, bird's eye view, because I think people are very scared. The number one question I get asked is, James, why don't you fear for your life? Aren't they going to kill you, break your legs? People are afraid of what is going to happen to them if they do what I do. That's the number one thing that I face, is fear. I don't know if this audience is less afraid than, I'm guessing, less afraid than most, but people are very afraid to do the effective and right thing out of fear of reprisal from their government. So my main message is it's okay. You know, you're going to be okay. The number one thing I would suggest you do is be a journalist, a citizen journalist, is to go to these meetings and film it and go public. And a lot of people can't do that because of their lives, their families, their jobs. But if you do have the ability to do it, is to go public with your information, put it on YouTube, broadcast it publicly, and join my team if you want. You know, become a videographer. If you're so inclined, make a donation. Spread the videos virally. I've bypassed the mainstream media. I don't even use the mainstream media. I go right to the internet, and I force the media to cover it. And we need to do more stuff like that. So Project Veritas is the website. I'll be standing out there at that table if you want to talk to me. Thank you very much for having me.